Hello everyone, I'm Alex. I produce music under the name KiloEve. Today I'm going to be reviewing two different exciters. The first is Logic Pro's Exciter and the second is Slate Digital's Fresh Air. The first audio track I'm going to run through this test is Pure Plutonium by Brian Bashirs, followed by Powdered Wigs by Gregory Sims, and the last would be Hedgehog in the Fog by Michael Mirovich. With Logic's Exciter, you can set where you want the artificial harmonics to come in. However, after hearing these harmonics, you might be tempted to get carried away and want to boost much harder, sometimes to the point where the lower frequencies start being affected as well. A nice thing about this stock plugin is how even a small dosage can add a form of saturation to the music that you run it through. On this example, 10.6% of harmonics can make the results very transparent. However, if you want to be more subtle with this, setting the artificial harmonics at the brilliant spectrum instead of presence or using it on mid frequencies and then going crazy with the harmonics, you can start to spike up much more air without it being too spiky. Turning off the drive signal gets you mostly the high end, giving you somewhat of a radio sound. This might be ideal for songs where you need to use samples, especially if they're in the background, or you're using them to introduce more elements in your music. Depending on the song and the mix, if you use the exciter often enough, you will start to realise that the original sounds are somewhat muffled or cold, and a little bit of saturation can help bring a warm-like sound. Colour 1 is a lot more aggressive than Colour 2. Colour 2, on the other hand, does trim the gain down on high frequencies quite a bit than Colour 1. This might be a better option depending on the sound and if you want a more subtle saturation. At first glance, Fresh Air is not really as versatile as using the default exciter from Logic, as they're purely set on presence and brilliance. I believe the strongest peak of the presence is around 4K and 6K, and the brilliance is strong at 17K and 19K, as opposed to the exciter where you can set your own threshold for where the saturation starts to come in. Even at a high dosage, the presence knob doesn't bring harshness, even to this rock track, which has a tint of muddiness from a large slop of mid-frequency content. The sparkle knob, which is mainly brilliance and a very high end of air, is actually quite harsh sounding in Pure Plutonium. Even in smaller doses, the track is incredibly hissy. The bass and snare sound are somewhat bleated and the hi-hats are overly windy and sandy. However, if it's set at 37%, the drums are so much more confident and aggressive, and the flanges and phases used in the mix are much more elevated and transparent. In the example of powdered wigs, the high presence sounds absolutely incredible at around 17 to 25%. It's incredibly spacious and it almost feels like you're actually in the front seat of a professional serious orchestra. The violin and double bass sound so much more bubbly and jolly. In conclusion, I feel that although Fresh Air is less versatile, it is actually doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. The curve of which the harmonics start coming in and shaping the frequency content isn't just like a straight curve like the one you see in Exciter. However, the dry signal in Exciter have these high frequency telephone radio-like qualities, and it can really be interesting for working with old samples, especially when you're manipulating the high end and using this for sound design sessions. Thank you very much for watching. Next time, I'll be comparing Wave's CLA delay to Logic's tape delay.